say where you are in the county, and if you want to put in like what you're planning to, what kind of political action you're planning to do this summer, that would be great. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and get started. As you all kind of know, I mean, most of the folks on the call here have been on our other electoral working group calls, but we have been kind of taking it easy since pre-primary, I guess. We were trying to do some GOTV stuff for the primary, and we just couldn't get it organized in time. So we've basically been taking a breather, but we know that there's a ton that is going to have to be done starting basically now for the fall election, and then also for 2022. And then we've had a couple of meetings. So we have a small subgroup of the electoral working group who has been working on strategy. And I think some of you are in that committee. We've been doing strategy of like how can we start really building an electoral program here in Montgomery County? The first thing I'll say is, and we're going to start reaffirming this in all of our meetings. Progressive Monco is called Progressive Monco because we're progressives. We were started by Bernie and some Warren supporters. I don't know if any of I think we might have like one Biden supporter, but anyway, the idea is that we're trying to push Monco in a progressive direction. We don't feel the Democrats are doing that. You know, by accident, they might get somebody out there who does happen to take a political stance that's a little left of center, but that's not really the MO. And that makes sense because that's where the donor base is coming from. But we don't think that's where the people are. And I think that what we learned with our primary campaigns, like a bunch of us were running for delegate, and what we learned was that there really are a lot of people out there who want more progressive policies and who just check out when it doesn't happen, and they just don't participate. They change the registrations to independent, or they stop voting, or they don't bother to register. But we also know there's a lot of Democrats out there who are tired of the same old thing happening in the party, and of course, same old thing happening in the Republican Party. And no changes made to really make a shift that's going to win seats. It's really going to start to win, and we have to start to win. We have to get progressives elected to make real differences in the county and the local races and in the state. So to that end, what we've decided to do is we're putting together a strategy to both activate people in the different precincts within the county. And I'm just talking about residents, not even necessarily voters. We're of course going to reach out to voters, but we want to help register new voters, and we want to get people excited and to show that they do have the power to make change. And to that end, we're working with a couple different groups to make that happen. So Progressive Monco, as I think all of you probably know, we've been working with PA Stands Up because we've been trying to build a PA Stands Up chapter here in Montgomery County. PA Stands Up currently has some of their own organizational challenges, but we are still talking with them about becoming a chapter. And so hopefully by the end of the year, that will happen. That's the plan. Because they are building statewide power, and they also have a lot of resources to build local power. And I'll talk a little bit about what they're doing. They're doing a Senate debate that I can talk about in a little bit. Because of that relationship, we also are working with Working Families Party, and we're working with Turn PA Blue. So we met with Jamie Parapato, who I'm sure a lot of you know of, if you don't know her personally, who runs Turn PA Blue. She has basically told us that she did not spend a ton of effort in Montgomery County just because of the way the county party is run. But she's very excited to hear about our work and also our work with our coalition friends in the different indivisible groups. And then also we have many coalition partners who are engaged in political action, maybe not necessarily on a party basis, but I'm thinking like NAACP groups or the Movement for Black and Brown Lives, people who have organizations throughout the county that are focused on racial justice, economic justice, environmental justice, and so on. And we're coordinating with all of them to do the efforts that I'm going to talk to you about tonight.
Sue?
Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
So, may I interrupt? You said she doesn't want to work with the party here because the way the party is run. Or
Well,
what do
I
you
guess
mean
I
by that?
mean, well, it's that I think she just feels like there's not she doesn't have a lot of power to change what the Montgomery County, the MCDC decides to do here. As some of you might know, a couple of weeks ago, there was the MCDC and the PA Dems had a meeting that that Nancy Kleinberg from, I always forget the name of her indivisible, but it's Narberth and Beyond, I think is
Yeah.
Nancy's.
Mhm.
Um, and the idea was to have the grassroots talk to the Democrats and talk about how the Democrats could take advantage of the grassroots energy, and that's not what happened. What happened was the Democrats, it was a dog and pony show for the Democratic Party again. And all of the grassroots people were kind of shoved to the end of the meeting. I left. I didn't hear. There were a few speakers, but generally speaking, it was not really what Nancy had envisioned it being. Um, and I think that the Democratic Party takes grassroots for granted because they know, where are we going to go? Nobody wants to vote for Trump. Nobody wants Trump to win. So we're all going to back Biden no matter what. And we are all going to work the phones. We're all going to knock doors for them. And so the Democrats just feel like they can sort of take us for granted. And I think that that's our position. And Jamie is a good foot soldier. That's exactly what she does. She gets out the vote for the Democrats, turn PA blue. I mean, that's the whole idea, is we have to win back the General Assembly. We have to make sure we hold the governorship, those kinds of things. But when it comes to changing the party, to changing who's running, to changing the policies, that's really where our focus is. And I think Jamie was very excited to hear that, and is willing to help us with those efforts. And that involves, whether it's cutting lists for us, because apparently getting lists is a really hard thing from the Democrats. Like that's like always a big fight or something. But we're working with Working Families Party and Jamie and PA Stands Up to get access to lists from People's Action and Use Van, all this other stuff. I still don't even know what all of them are, but again, I'll talk about that some more later too. So, and I'm sorry I'm going on and on. I just want to really kind of give everybody the overview of what all's been happening in the background the last few weeks. Um, so we are working with these coalition partners, and the reason we are working with them is specifically because we want to support and elect progressive candidates. It's not about blue no matter who. It's about, and this is for, I'm speaking just for Progressive Mako, it's about getting people elected who are going to make a difference in people's lives, not just continue the same policies just because we kept the fascists out of office. Yes, that's a thing, but we also want to make things better for everyday working people in Montgomery County and Pennsylvania. So as part of that effort, we also want to find and locate people who are interested in running for office, whether it's, a row office, or committee person, and in particular, committee people. We know there's room for movement there. There are a lot of open seats. There are some Democratic chairs who are interested in working with us, some area leaders interested in working with us, and we're going to continue to explore that. But we know there are people like other voters in the county who would love to do that, but don't really know how or where to start. And if we can find progressives who are interested in doing that, we want to support them and help grow those folks into candidates. So in order to make all of that happen, well, I'll tell you what, I'll shut up for a few minutes. Does anybody have questions or comments? And David McMahon has kind of been my co-chair here now with the Electoral Working Group for a little while. So David, do you have anything you want to add before I just don't want to keep droning on the whole time?
Um, no, I would just I would just reiterate the main point that you know going forward we will be clear that and we'll all work out the together like the final look of this, but there's a whole set of policies that kind of go with being a progressive and things that we want to see and real change kind of happen in the world, and that's what we're promoting. We're promoting a set of policies, and we'll find like-minded people and those candidates who support that, and that's kind of like what our mission is countywide, to do that work, realizing that we are working in a two-party system. Nonetheless, there is like real change that we want to see in the world, and it starts right here, like in our county, and that the issues that seem to be sort of like national level and seem to be like too big to tackle actually can be broken down into work that we do right here in our own hometowns. And so that's why we'll be starting off. We'll be looking at this committee level work, and then all the way up the chain, the levels of government. There's state work and legislation to do. There's federal level work and pressure to bring to get seed bills passed that way. And then there's all the sort of municipal and township level work that all the policies that we want to see kind of manifest themselves slightly differently at the different levels of government. And we gotta rebuild from the bottom, and that's partly what this meeting is about today. Is to kind of like identify where our priorities will be, and how we'll start to promote it and kind of like break it down into sort of like some real concrete work that we can get done.
Yeah, and thanks. I would just like to also point out that what we're basically trying to do, like with Ellen on the call, I mean, Ellen has done this in Springfield Township, and we're looking to replicate and kind of roll that out throughout the county to the extent that we can. So our efforts are really going to be focused on finding folks to help us do that. Did anybody else want to ask any questions or anything before I go on to our next step?
Where is there? Do you have any kind of numbers that will tell us where we are? Sorry,
That's
in the
okay.
west.
Sort of further the idea that it
Oops.
could have been even
Okay.
worse than what you described a couple moments ago. But the
Sorry.
calculation
Okay.
That always happens to me too. Any
Where,
numbers where we are about?
where we are in the western part of the county, are there townships or boroughs that aren't at all organized? And so we can start at the very bottom there.
Well, that's a good thing you asked, because that's exactly what our first efforts are going to be. We don't have those numbers in our back pocket at this point. So that's really a good segue. I mean, if nobody else has any other questions or comments right now, I can just move right into that. Like the first thing that we want to do, so Progressive Monco has a list of about 1,000 people that was compiled from activists last year who helped PA Stand Up in Montgomery County do phone banking for candidates. So they did phone banking and text banking for Nancy Genst. I think they did some for Jonathan Casa. Largely it was for Joe Biden though. But anyway, we have this list of folks, and some of them show up in different meetings, some of them donate money. So it's a list of people who we know are interested in being activists and who maybe just need to be invited to come back out and help. But what we need to do is we want to take that list and
Fighting climate change.
we don't have addresses for those people, for the vast majority of them. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to ask for volunteers from tonight's call, and then we're also doing outreach to everybody within the electoral working group. We wanted to get some people to volunteer to help us clean that list. And all that means is we're going to go on Van and we're going to look up these voters and we're going to put their addresses on the list. And then we're going to do outreach to the folks on our list. And we're going to ask them, because we want to be able to divide them by location. And my guess is that a lot of them are in the southwestern part, or I guess southeastern part of the county, not so much the northwest part of the county. Maybe a few, there probably are some, but I'm guessing that a lot of them are southeast. But we want to first decide and figure out where our list members are located. And then we want to do outreach to them to recruit volunteers to help us do outreach through different townships in the county. So that's really our first step. And actually, as long as I'm mentioning it, is anybody interested? I know a few of you have already volunteered to help us with that work. Is anybody interested in helping us with that? That's great, because it's actually super simple. We're thinking of maybe even doing an in-person event where we all just like bring our laptops and a couple of 6-packs and bring up Van on the laptop, and we all just, and that helps too, because then if you have a question or something about like, oh, what do I do with this person? You can drink a beer or whatever, then you have to drink. Drinking game. So that's great. Yeah. and then once we have that list, then we're going to use our members as basically we're going to recruit volunteers from that list to start to do outreach throughout the county. I mean, I think there's no question that there are some townships that are strategically better for us to aim at, I guess, if you will. Like, I'll just use like Jamie, for example. Jamie Parapato was telling us that she's in Lower Marion, and there's a lot of work that could be done there. So it might be that we learn from our list and from people that we talk to where there's room to either get committee people elected or to find candidates for row offices that are awesome candidates that we can support and do some of that work. So throughout the summer, that's really what we're going to be doing, is kind of marking off territories and areas and townships where we think we can really focus our work. Obviously, we're not big enough yet as an organization to do the entire county, but that's kind of the steps we're going to take. David, you had a question, or you were going to add
Yeah,
something?
I was just going to say, once we kind of like know where our members already are, we will also kind of couple that with a few areas where we may want to make interventions. You're thinking of the General Assembly. There are still two districts at the House level that are represented by Republicans in the western part of the county. And depending on who is in that area, that may be, that sort of those Democratic committee people in those towns in that district there. Maybe we can help them build something and put together a credible challenge out there. So, and that may take a couple cycles to get to, but that'll be part of our thinking while we're starting to do this mapping.
Yeah. Yeah, and thanks for making that point, because this is really like the very first baby step. So this is part of a plan that we're putting together, not just for November, but for 2022 primaries, for 2022 in November and beyond to 2024. We are really starting to put in place a whole strategy. And again, this is where our membership in PA Stands Up helps us, because we want to replicate some of the wins that they've had in Philly, like Reclaim, or Lehigh Valley just was able to successfully get a lot of their candidates elected in the primary. So these are we have the tools, and we have other like advisors, I guess, who know how to do this. It's going to be really, it's great having this kind of bench full of talent that we can rely on to help us do this in Montgomery County. So Tom, that was really a really long answer. I hope that answered your
Oh, you're still
question though.
answering my question there. Yeah. I'm wondering if maybe it would be worthwhile getting one or two people to work on seeing what the situation really is. How close were we to winning those two seats, and how big is the Democratic Party, and so on.
Yeah.
So we can concentrate first on the doable.
Yeah, and we do have those numbers, so we will be doing that analysis. There is some numbers available about who won what race by how much, and what the base of voter registrations were and things like that. So yeah, that's all going to be part of the analysis that we're going to be doing. I mean, the short term, that's a little bit in the longer term. So in the short term, we want to be able to reach out to people who we can encourage to help us volunteer. And the volunteers are going to be, I'm sorry, when we reach out to our list, we're going to recruit people who will help us recruit other volunteers and do other outreach into the township and the county. The purpose of that is, again, to identify people who are interested in running, but also to identify people in some of these locations that you're even talking about, Tom, where people might not really be putting their hands up because they don't really think there's a point. I mean, we met a lot of people, for example, up in Pottstown, who said to us, there's tons of progressives up here and the Democrats just leave us hanging because they don't think there's enough money to make it worth their while. So, I mean, there are places like that that we will probably identify in the process.
I built the Springfield Party in the last millennium, and but there were a whole variety of techniques that got people to be interested in joining with us. And
exactly. I mean, that's exactly what we'll be doing. So, and on that note, I mean, I do have a couple things that I can mention that we specifically will be doing. One of the things that I mentioned is going to be, again, just doing one-on-one outreach, doing the deep canvassing of people in certain townships that we think are useful or that are reachable, like Tom is kind of describing. We also want to plan a September workshop. So in September, we're going to do, we may make a series of workshops, maybe more than one, but we're going to do workshops about how to become politically active. This is kind of, it's really not meant for people who are already like diehard Indivisible members who know how to do this stuff, but it's really meant for people who are looking for a way to get involved and they're not sure how. That's specifically a perfect area where we want to work on that with all of our coalition partners. So that's something that we're going to be rolling out as an idea to all of them and getting everyone's buy-in. So it won't just be PA, or it won't just be Progressive Monco members, it's going to be members of all of these organizations, but also just doing like presentation and promotion of this throughout the county to get as many people involved as we can who are interested in helping and who want to make a difference. So that's planned, like that's tentative for September. We don't have dates for that yet. And like I said, it could be one workshop, it might be a series of workshops. And as part of that, one of the workshops that we'll be doing, and probably its own workshop, is how to be a committee person or how to run for committee person. This is kind of based on the work that Ellen's been doing. Ellen has a great presentation that she's been giving around the county. And you know, when people put their hand up, we want to invite them to come to that particular event. So that's the purpose of those is to identify people who are interested and also to get people interested, you know, to find people who will help us knock doors for November, you know, or help us do fundraising or whatever we plan to do for the November campaign and the candidates that we support. One of the other points, one of the other purposes of that is to identify the candidates that are out there now that are progressive and who we can back, who we can get behind. You know, we know that this is Montgomery County. We're not there. We don't have a whole ton of Bernie Sanders out there who we can get behind, but there's a lot of candidates who really do care about helping the people and not the corporations. And you know, those are people we can back. So we're actually starting to look for suggestions already. So I'm starting to get some trickling in. And if anyone knows of candidates who are running in their particular township, I guess I'm trying to think of like the best way to collect those. We'll probably do like a Google form or something like that. Anybody on this call, you can just email me directly or put it on Slack. So, and if anybody, you should have my email address from the invites and stuff, but it's just Sue Caskey, like in my name thing, @gmail.com. So yeah, we're starting to hear about a few people here and there.
So it's Claire.
Hey, Claire, go
Hi, and
ahead.
I apologize to everyone for not being on the video, but my hair looks like I stuck my finger in a socket, so I didn't feel like fixing it. So,
That's okay.
when you say progressive, what do you mean? Like, what are the policies that you're looking for in a candidate that they believe in, that they support?
That's a really good point. And actually, we're going to be putting together sort of a statement of values that these candidates will receive. And we will ask them, can you support these values? That this is what Progressive Monco stands for. And they may not be able to support all of them, but we want to hear back from them about what things they can get behind. So I'm going to just speak very generally because we haven't formed that list yet, but it's the things that we've been fighting for here in Progressive Monco. So, you know, Medicare for all, you know, single payer healthcare, racial justice, including ending cash bail, environmental justice, and also Green New Deal. And that has to do with infrastructure spending and things like that. So, I mean, those are just three off the top of my head, and there are probably going to be others too, like issues relating to school funding and things like that. Economic justice, there are some issues like that. David's been really instrumental in working on anti-privatization efforts. So there are things like that. So yeah, we're going to basically have a list of 10 or 12 policies that we would like to see that these candidates can support. Obviously, they're not all going to support all of them. Again, I mean, we already know that, and it's not a litmus test where if you can't support one of them, you're off the list. It's really just more about it's about moving the ball forward, you know, like starting to make some change that we haven't. And part of the reason why we have to do this, I'll just stand on my soapbox for 1 second, as if I haven't already. But after we went through that the meeting with the PA Dems, they don't have ideas. They don't have any ideas about how to move this ball forward. And that was the thing I think that was the scariest, at least for me. And I know that a lot of folks that I talked to afterwards kind of felt the same. Like, where are the new ideas? They still are like, we're not the Republicans. That's not an idea. That's not hiring a social media director is not an idea. Like, what's the social media director going to promote if you're afraid to talk about policies that people want? Policies that 70% of Americans want. And the Democrats are not. Well, I mean, Joe Biden, he does it every now and then. He gets out there and he says it, and that's great. But we want people to be a little more bold and brave here in Montgomery County. So that's kind of what we're aiming for. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in. I mean, David, or Allie or Jamie. I mean, you guys are in our steering committee. So
Deb has a question.
Deb, yeah.
Well, it's a question and a comment. I know that I've been working on a level like really granular. We in Lower Gwinnett, we had a 5-person board of supervisors that were Republican forever. And so our work that I've been involved in the last several years is getting Dems on the board. And one of them is very progressive, and we work, she and I work closely. The other one, she's very involved in environmental stuff, but she works a little bit differently. The two candidates that we are working with for this upcoming election, again, one is very progressive and one is maybe not as progressive, but our goal is to change things in the township, because the Republican way has been, things are fine. They've been fine for a couple hundred years. So why change anything? So, like on that level, I feel like that kind of change is important. And I wonder, like, I'm thinking about this one particular candidate, if we were to put this questionnaire in front of this person, I feel like his response would be, I'm giving away who it is. I feel like he would say, well, these are not township issues, so I'm not thinking about them, or I don't think I want to answer that question. How do we address that sort of thing if we're working at a very, very local level? I mean, like I say, I know these people, so I know that one of them is very progressive and one of them not so much. So how do we fine tune that for at the very, very local level?
Well, that's a really good question. Actually, David was just talking with me about this earlier. So David, you want to talk about like the 3 different levels of support? Like, there are different ways we can
Yeah.
support each candidate. So I'll let him.
Yeah, there's a couple of different things. I mean, first I'll tackle like, we're just in a township, but the national level issues that we are facing all show up at the local level too. And part of our work will actually be sort of framing those arguments and investigating that, whether that is, you take an example of Medicare for all. Well, that plays out in the local budgets and healthcare as part of the municipal workforce payrolls and all these different things, as well as, what is the state of healthcare in a particular community, right? And in the more rural parts of the county, that's going to be lack of access to care, and sort of there's not enough hospitals out that way. And then it's going to look different in Abington and sort of like the centers of healthcare. So that'll show up differently. You think of something at the federal level, like the infrastructure bill that may or may not come through. They have asset recycling in there, which is basically privatization by another name, in which we'll sell off this publicly controlled, locally held utility to fund some other future project. And it all shows up at the municipal level. And we'll just have to help the people that we're supporting, who are interested in talking with us, make those connections and reframe that. We fought here in Norristown to stop the sale of our sewer system to Aqua, Pennsylvania. Okay, and that is part of the larger abstract commodification of water that is an international issue and seems too big to grapple with. But at the local level, it looks like these mundane transactions. And part of our work will be identifying that whole slew of concerns, and part of being progressive is some of that is defending the public utility model. Do we want to see a public utility model applied to broadband, right? For example, these are all things that all happen at the local level. If you want to design for an energy sustainable future, that kind of planning that work can be done here. That happens again in the zoning meetings. There's a ton of work to do at the local
Yeah,
level.
like the Sierra Club is doing Ready for
Yeah,
100
Ready
is
for
addressing
100.
just on the local level.
Right.
Right.
So there's a ton of implications for all the national concerns that we have at the local level. And then again, if anyone wants to, if they can't fully commit to sort of what we have as our priorities, okay, because we will want to be selective we don't want to do just paper endorsements. I don't think. I mean, we can all decide that as we go forward. My own position is we be selective with our endorsement because we potentially can be more effective and punch above our weight, right? If we commit time and resources and people to our endorsements, right? And actually get those wins, right? That said, in being selected we can still have a couple levels of support. So an endorsement would be one thing, right? That would come with more extensive commitments. We could have support where maybe we would take point jointly in different forums or things like that. And then there could be something like a recommendation where maybe a person would be part of like a voting guide or something like that got put out. But that'll be something we would want to think through as a working group here. But I think we would have different levels of support for candidates. But also, I think part of our work, like as progressives, would be to show the connections all through the governmental chain of these same concepts and how they play out throughout our governance.
Thank you. That was more information than I had expected, but yes, it makes total sense.
Sorry,
Yeah,
that was kind of a long answer, but.
Mark Cohen was going to
Hey,
ask a question. Hey,
I just
how's it
want to
going?
add to that. I agree with almost everything David said, except for different levels of endorsement. So, you stay true to values and decide what Progressive Montco needs from somebody or needs to hear honestly from somebody before an endorsement is made, rather than, well, we recommend this candidate. What's the point? What's the point? And to that, from the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top, very often people who are running for local office have aspirations for higher office. And, I don't think we'd want to put an endorsement on somebody who said, well, I don't want to deal with those issues. They're not local. And suddenly they're running at a level where they very much affect us all. So, I think if they can answer or don't want to answer, just ignore them. What's the point? I wanted to just add, and Ellen, you really inspired me regarding committee people. Besides finding people to run for office, Ellen, you brought up several times. I just saw an area 4, which is Lower Providence, Audubon area where I live, up to Skippack and Limerick. There are 10 vacancies currently for committee people. And those positions can easily be, those people can be appointed if we can find the people. So I think a quick email out to the membership might be a great way of identifying people who say, yeah, I would be interested in running, and then find out if they live in those particular areas. I'd be happy to do that. But just in my area 4, there are at least 10 vacancies. So, why wait until the election, get these people in, let them become incumbents before the May election next year. So I'd be happy to work on that. And you know that, Sue. So
Yeah. And so, but if the party chair or whatever doesn't appoint, does someone else can Joe Foster appoint to no one else can appoint?
they have to approve, right? The MCDC has to approve, but basically I'm sure it's just a rubber stamp when an area leader or a township or borough leader says, I want this person assigned. So
Well, I
know,
mean,
So
what if they
maybe-
decide not to seat anybody? They're just like, no, that's okay. We're not going to appoint that person. We're going to leave it open.
Wow. Everybody
Well,
should
it
know
would.
about that. Yeah.
there
But it
are
would.
differences of personality, and I mean,
Right.
it used to be that we had somebody in my town who wanted to go over everybody's head if she could, and so there's a
Yeah.
certain way that it should be done, but you have to make sure that it is done that way in order to have it happen.
Well, I mean, the other thing is that the elections take place in May at the primary. So that's the other reason why we really want to hit the ground running, because we're not even, what, are we down to 10 months now? I think we have 10 months before that election. So identifying people who are interested in running, giving them the training, and then getting them out there on the street, and then running campaigns for them. We could elect 10 people to those seats. That's definitely someplace we could start to try to identify people with that many open seats.
To what extent do we work with the Democratic Party?
I'm sorry?
To what extent do we work with the Democratic Party?
We don't technically. That's not really, we don't see that as our job, if you will. I mean, we try to say that we're nonpartisan, but there aren't any progressive Republicans, so we're kind of stuck with the Democrats. So yeah, we don't really. So like, for example, just because someone is a Democrat endorsed candidate does not mean we will support that person. So that's somebody asked us that question last year, and that's the answer. We're really trying to. So the other, we're really trying to be in a position eventually, maybe not this election or even in 2022 primaries, but the idea is that Progressive Monco wants to be in a position of power where when we go to an area leader or we go to a Democratic chair in a township and we say, we really like this person for this open seat, they know that they should appoint that person to that open seat. Or when we say that we like this person, that we're endorsing this person, that gives them a leg up, or they come to us and they seek our endorsement. That's really where we're trying to go. Jamie, you had your hand up. You wanted to say something.
Yeah, thanks. Well, but my friend from Shenandoah raised the issue of the ladder of electoral, over the years climbing higher. Sue, you raised a great point about, or Deborah, I'm sorry, Deborah, you raised a good question that this organization will have to consider as well, and that's like Republicans versus Democrats, and Democrats versus other Democrats. That being, one more progressive than the other. We haven't discussed whether we would get involved in a race for a Democratic municipal candidate against a longstanding Republican trying to crack that council majority or commissioner majority. We have to weigh that out. But they should be asked to respond to our questionnaire, and then we would figure out what, do we want to support this person who hates all those other things that David gave you a long list of them? Do we want to support that person and promote them in the ladder and sit with the Republican? I mean, I don't know. That's a question that'll have to be answered. And we do work with the Democratic Party in the sense that our good friend Ellen Stevenson from Springfield Township is part of the Democratic Party. Tom, you too. You're both committee people, aren't you? Stinkers.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just answering.
Something, it may be a little far out, but I think that in a better world where we had two political parties that actually gave us a choice, it would be a lot easier to push against one party or the other. It doesn't matter. My own feeling since with the white nationalist movement and the Republican Party, which seems to be doubling down on crazy, I'm really my own feeling personally is that I will help the Democrat to get rid of a Republican, because right now the way that the General Assembly is, they're moving really quickly on a lot of the far right agenda. So we want to be able to stop them in one house or the other, at least. That's just my feeling, because I think we're in a crisis.
Mhm.
I think if the Democrats were in power, then I would be personally more selective in who I was going to support.
Mhm.
But right now, it's the greater evil out there to me. Just my own feeling on this.
Yep. I mean, I totally get that. And I have two, this is just my personal feeling about it. The reason we're here is because the Democrats. We're here because the Democrats have been picking corporate policy for
Mhm.
30 years since Bill Clinton. And Obama, I know he's beloved by the Democrats. I believe he gave us Trump because of his economic policies, left so many people behind, they were just ripe for the picking.
Mhm.
And so the problem that I have now is that the Democrats kind of, PA Dems included, I heard it in the Democratic convention last year. They feel like they have us in this position where we always are going to have to pick the least worst, and that's going to be them. And so they don't have to do the work. I think that David kind of mentioned before, I think that if we endorse someone who's a progressive, but we do have a voter list, like here's our voter card, here's what Progressive Monco thinks, you vote for these people. We can
Right.
still include people we're not endorsing or knocking doors for and so on, because there's going to be plenty of Democratic groups out there that are going to be stumping just for Democrats because yeah, we have to get the Republicans out of there. My feeling is though that if you run a weak Democrat, why would they vote for the Democrat? You know, like if you have Casa versus the guy that he ran against, who I can never remember his name, but the Republican, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not enough of a distinction. Of course, I'm going to vote for the guy who's the incumbent, who is really nice, and we all know him. Like, where's the distinction there? So there are a lot of those issues too, and I think that at some point we have to say any old Democrat is not necessarily going to win, you know. And so that's really, I think, our hope is, or our feeling is, that the more you stand for something that people want and believe in, the more likely you are to win. And I don't think the Democrats will go there in many
I
cases.
agree with you, and I think it's one of the reasons I believe that the party needs to be changed, not only from the outside but from the inside.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Ellen, too. I mean, yeah, we are facing a massive
Yeah.
takeover of democracy. So I'm going to let Kitty speak. And before Kitty speaks, I just wanted to say we're going to go for another 10 minutes and then we'll have to stop because we do have another meeting right behind this one. But Kitty, your hand's up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, the main reason that we're in the fix that we're in is because of the two-party system. And so this is a totally separate project, but I really would like to find a group to really work to change the whole electoral system so we have ranked choice voting and, and instant runoff voting. And, like the way the system is now, we can only do what we can do, which is, work
Okay.
with the Democrats or not. But but ultimately, I'd like to see the whole system change. And I know it's not, for this meeting, but I just want to put that there.
There are groups that want to do that.
It's on
There are
our
groups
wish
that
list.
you can belong to groups that are, I think, active in our area that want to do that.
Kitty, I don't think any of us have a problem with the two things you just mentioned, the electoral reforms. I mean, you don't need a third group for that. You need people who actually raise it as a question.
Yeah.
Right.
Although I would go further to say that the Democratic Party will fight you tooth and nail on ranked choice voting or anything else.
Oh, yeah.
Right. We have to flip a lot of people before we can get that. Although they did it in New York somehow.
Yeah, that's
So.
really long range, but it's something that we need to be talking about and putting out there.
Yep, it's on our wish list for sure. So for those of you who joined late, I was asking for, and I'll ask again, and if you haven't yet, if you would add put it in the chat. We wanted to get folks who are willing to volunteer to help us update our list and clean our list, which is to just get addresses, like to look for the addresses for the voters that are on our list right now, our mailing list. And like I said, we'll probably do an in-person thing with everybody just sit around with their laptops and looks at Van and downloads the addresses for the names. and then subsequent to that, we'll be recruiting folks to help volunteer calling everyone on our list. And these are activists already, they're not cold calls. So anyone who can help us with that, that would be awesome.
There were other lists that we could be working on, like somebody going to the polling places on election day and talking to the people behind the desk. I mean, these are people who are interested in politics already.
Isn't that the committee people? The committee people do that, right? Or this,
No,
it's like,
no.
they're just volunteers.
The election board,
Yeah.
civic-minded people who are
Well,
willing to
hopefully we'll
try
get them well before November, whatever the election day is. We're trying to
well,
get
we're
them in
not going to get it
September to put
this
their
year
hands
now,
up.
but before next year. But
Yeah.
I used to go around to all the polling places
Mhm.
and talk up the possibility of being more involved. And so these are people who are involved already. We can get them more involved. I got a great candidate for who became a commissioner, doing it that way, in that way. People, if you go to places like cooperative markets,
Uh-huh.
people who are already looking at life the way we want to look at it, and get people there to
Yes.
realize that there's something they can do. But I just suggest that there are other ways that we could be looking for activists.
Yep, absolutely. And what I'm talking about with our list of, like, give or take 1,000 people, we know that they've already been engaged in activism last year and the get out the vote efforts, and working with PA Stands Up. And part of what we'll be asking them to do is to volunteer to help do this kind of outreach that Tom's talking about, to other groups, to other places, to do, door knocking and so on. So yeah, this is just the very, very beginning of what we're trying to build. Does anybody else have any questions or anything? And also, I'm recording, so I know some of you came late. I'll send out the link to everyone so that you can find it on YouTube, along with the chat. Everybody's names and stuff, are like, their introductions are there. I usually put that on the Slack channel. Any other comments or questions from anybody? Yeah, Tom, why don't you go ahead? We haven't heard from you yet today.
I did receive a little while ago an endorsement from Bold Progressives, so I just wanted to take the time and thank everyone that actually voted me in there. I'm looking forward to continually being progressive through this election coming up, because it's, with all those QAnon crazies like we're running against, it's really hard in school
Oh my
board
God.
to do. So
Yeah.
it's there's so much to talk about there with the Keeping Kids in School PAC going, the
Yeah.
PAC that's funding all these Republicans / not really, because they're actually QAnon people in the Republican Party. So it's going to be a trip.
Oh God, I was on Reddit today, which I really have to stop. That's such a bad habit. But they have the whole it seems like they have a whole subreddit for people who have lost family members to QAnon, and I was just like pulling my hair out, like, oh my God, because my brother is one of them. On that note, Tom, I was going to say that we will also, we want to do these political action workshops, but we also want to do some town halls with local candidates. So would love to hear your ideas about that. I mean, get people out who are willing to, like a meet the candidate thing can be more than one township. It can be, topical, can be just school board, it could be just township related, but that's something that I think we would really like to do. And we'll be like working with our coalition partners to do that too, because again, we can't spread out through the whole county, but we have a lot of super activists out there that can help us, and we'll do that.
Amongst the candidates that I know of right now, they're one of the biggest complaints from the progressive ones that I know are that right now, the only real way for someone to really know that a candidate is progressive is they have to really seek out and like look into all of their stuff. And a lot of the words that some of the other candidates that are not so progressive are using are very similar buzzwords, but then when they put them together, they mean something completely different. But people don't really care about that. They just see the buzzword and say, oh, this Republican, well, they don't know they're quite Republican in school board races. they'll think that they're akin to someone being progressive-ish, maybe. So that's one of the things. So like definitely having this like town hall with having people who are candidates, doesn't matter if they're just school board, doesn't matter like that kind of thing, just showing them up and saying, hey, these are things that we believe in. We're going to make sure we move them forward and keep those on our mind as we do every action in this position.
Yep. And publicizing our endorsements and the questionnaires and things like that too. So
Absolutely.
2 minutes. Deborah, did you want to add something or?
Yeah, and real quick, something that I'd like to put on a wish list is that, and I don't know how we would go about this specifically, but I would love to get more younger people involved. I see a couple of younger people on this call, but you know, I think that's where we can find progressives. We just have to cultivate that population.
Well,
So
we do have
that would be on my wish list.
we do have a youth group. We can task them with figuring that out. So, all right. So next steps, I will be in touch with our volunteers about when we're going to be doing the list cleaning, and stay tuned for the next meeting, which will probably be, it's July. I still want to do one in August, even though I know it's vacation time and stuff like that, because we really want to, I'll probably be sending out alerts before that though. So just stay tuned, I guess is what I would say. All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for joining tonight. I really appreciate it. Have a great night. All right. Bye-bye.